I will say though, that's a lot of cometh. There's a lot of cometh in that quote.
Yeah.
I think that this is further proof that that whole gods are not real thing is a load of malarkey the Emperor's pushing. He has faith in everything he has. Stop being surprised people turn religious.
You can have faith in things which are not necessarily religious. I have faith that my delivery driver will come and he's delivering my pizza.
You can, but I think in the context of this,
Warhammer, different kind of faith. Yeah, there's.
I like that idea that your example, how that when you get it, you're like, praise be to Pizza Hut when you get it.
Well, I know it's coming, but I'm not putting my hands together and worshipping the pizza gods, although maybe we all should because it's divine.
They bestowed an extra garlic dip. Praise be.
I praise be to him because Lord knows you cannot out Pizza the Hut.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Beginner to Expert podcast on Lorecrimes. We are continuing with our historical telling of both the time before and during the Imperium. If you've been following what we've been doing for the last few episodes, you'll know that last time we were at the Great Crusade, where we did an overview of the events, and now we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of it, because there's a lot to talk about with the Great Crusade, and today is no exception, because we're going to be starting on probably the first of maybe 3, 4, 5 more parts where we're going to discuss all the different legions, but we'll get into that. To begin this episode, though, it is time for the question of the week. Now, for those of you who were on our last episode, the question of the week, we had our friend Dredanon on, which was very good fun. It was the Blood Ravens episode. And the hashtag was #Klepto. What would you steal from the 40k universe? And I've got a few choice
I'm
selections.
excited for this one. I'm really ready.
Yeah? Well, there's some pretty good ones. So we'll start things off with DJ Beast, who's a regular commenter. And shout out to you, mate. We love to see you on the channel commenting on the live streams and such. He said, #Klepto, I would steal Ferrus Manus. With how much lore that guy has, I don't think anyone would know he's missing until the 50th millennium.
Oh, ouch.
That's
my
in the
iron
chat,
heart.
boys.
My iron heart. Oh, where does this guy live? I need to fight him.
It's definitely the highest rated one of all the comments.
Fight him what, for being right?
I didn't say he was wrong. I just said I had to fight him.
He didn't even say anything mean. He just said he has no lore.
I know. God, they really got ahead of themselves there, didn't they?
Oh,
I know. It sucks.
Nice.
So the second one we have is from is it Casmud2131? He said #Klepto. I would steal the L from the World Eater's name to make it even easier for people to get their name mixed up with the word bearers, which is something all the time.
That's a real issue, isn't it? I actually had that before.
I think I want to hit that guy with a brick.
Yeah.
But again, I'm pretty sure that was the second highest rated of all the comments as well. So by popular demand, if you will.
The Word Eaters, they aggressively
how many likes did it have?
19.
I want to hit 19 people with a brick.
Aggressive, literally. Even they have librarians in Warhammer. These are like a legion of aggressive librarians, and not the magic kind, the book kind, and they just
book kind. And as they hit you, they're just going, shh, make less noise while we're beating you.
Hit you with that silence.
How do I pronounce this? So the next one is from Aenarion Targaryen 6973. And he said, I would steal the Sword of Cain from Fantasy and take it to the 40k universe and give it to the Eldar so they can start killing named characters.
Yes.
Wow.
That one's for Colin.
Never have I had such a simp of a question. Wow. Answer, sorry.
Colin's favorite subscriber now.
Based in Tyrion pill.
But who's
I knew it would make Colin happy.
Colin has to answer though. Who's the first named character who gets it then?
It'd be fun. That's what I need to think on, because it would be depending on, there's a couple answers I think would be quite poetic. Captain Artemis of the Death Watch probably has it coming after he ruined Iliad. It would be really funny if he just murdered, the lion immediately after he comes back and he just gets ganked. That would make me laugh. Calgar also would be pretty funny.
He just needs to die, and that's epic enough.
More so. No man,
What's his hate for killing Calgar? What's that about? How?
Marnanius Calgor will live forever.
That's right, baby.
Calgar just needs to die. He's just so old, dude.
There was one question I found that made me laugh really hard because of the second half of it. May I give that one a read?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
This one is from Liz SP9LB. And, hashtag klepto. I'd steal whatever eldritch hair products allow the Emperor to have hair that's straight, despite regularly holding a flaming sword 6 inches from his head. So first of all, that's a good point. However, the second part was... Also, the episode was great. I can't believe Colin was able to record with the Blood Ravens actively tunneling into his home. Again, my bad on the construction timing. Did not work out very well.
They do.
I'm sure
they do destroy.
Something in the live chat. There was just like the Imperial Fists are currently fortifying Colin's position. Like brilliant.
People are so funny. I also had the Blood Angels always made the goof.
We're not even in the podcast
I know.
anymore.
The Blood Ravens do destroy knowledge of their legion in other places, so they would come for you.
They do. They were after me.
Law accurate.
Bury him. And the last comment I have is from CRDT2TM. You know how happy I just made you before, Colin? You might want to brace yourself for this one.
It's going to get ruined, isn't it?
Well, it's hashtag klepto. I would steal Colin's shit takes on Bretonia, Chads, and offer them up as the greatest gift Nurgle has ever received.
I see. I now want to hit 21 people with a brick.
With one brick or more bricks?
Listen, man, whatever it takes.
Colin, did you see
don't want to
the
bring
first
one
place
brick
I
and then it shatters. You need several just in case.
Indeed. What'd you say, Eli?
Did you see the deadlifts for the Grail that I mentioned you?
It is nice.
I don't think I did.
Well,
I'm gonna need to look at that when I'm not. If you put it up in the edit, I'm gonna need to not look at it right now because it'll ruin the audio. But I will. Actually.
Is he gonna make? Is that guy gonna get the pipe sound effect now because he's
more and more tempting.
We'll have to explain that at some point.
Oh yeah, I'll explain it. All right.
Oh, he's gonna do it.
You gotta save it.
Let's save it for a good point.
You gotta wait till no one has it coming. You gotta wait till you're talking
in the
about
middle. In the middle of it.
Not a fan of Bretonia. Not a fan of that comment. 0 out of 10.
10 out of 10 for me, baby.
With that said and done, it's time for us to put up a new question of the week, and this one I believe was devised by Hal, and I think it's brilliant. So the we'll say what it is first. So question of the week is best chaos god to worship ? And the hashtag is Chaos Me Daddy. So hashtag Chaos Me
Daddy. Let's go.
Who is the best Chaos God, and why would you worship him?
You can I'm
assuming it's going to be mainly Slanesh, but we'll see.
You can give a genuine answer if you want, or you can just make it completely just brain dead, ruined. If you know what I mean. We like all kinds of answers. Are we going to
ban anyone who says malice, or is that okay?
It's technically
mouse best.
Also, we didn't say it has to be 40k. You can also mention the Great Horned Rat if you wanted to.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool.
Praise Hashut.
Yeah.
May your Chaos Dwarf laborers forever earn you all the gold. Don't worry, they're not slaves. They're laborers. CA.
They're employed technically.
Also, I thought you meant a video, Eli. I did in fact see that. Already
okay.
Was not a fan, but it is cool design. It is a cool design.
We're gonna make deadlifts for the lady as well because I got people asking.
Yeah, I'm actually wearing a deadlift for the Dark Gods.
Nice.
Hidia.
Blessed.
Anyway, yeah, it's good. It's good.
Lorecrimes merch someday.
One day, I have some ideas. But yeah, with that all said and done, and speaking of deadlifts for the Dark Gods, I suppose it's time to pass it over to Eli for the beginner section. I believe, is that the case, Eli? Brilliant.
Yeah, that would be me. Today we're going to talk about the first and third and 4th Legions of Space Marines and what they were up to during the Great Crusade, and maybe a little tiny bit slightly before that, because they were kind of, pretty sure all of them were around in the Unification Wars. So, first of all is the Dark Angels, the 1st Legions, the OGs of the Space Marines. We've talked about Lionel Johnson quite a lot on the channel, so I think many of our viewers may know a thing or two about these knightly honorable guys, but they were the absolutely first Astartes to fight for the Emperor and with the Emperor, and were once divided into 6 distinct combat wings known as the Hexagrammaton, which doesn't exist really nowadays as much as it used to, but it was big for them back then. They found their Primarch Lionel Johnson on the world of Caliban and quickly took to his knightly ways. During the Crusade, they had a record only rivaled by the Luna Wolves and grew to become one of the largest legions until losing over 50,000 Space Marines in the Rangdan Xenocides. The Legion developed a rivalry with Lehman Russ and the Space Wolves, and they had some issues internally with Mr. Luther, the Lionel Johnson's second in command, almost letting Lionel Johnson be assassinated. The Alliance sent Luther and some legionaries back to the homeworld of Caliban, and this would prove to be a disastrous mistake in the times to come. Hal will talk about them a lot more in the expert section. The Emperor's children were likely, in my opinion, the most noble and regal of all the Space Marine legions ever, and were literally the best legion before bad things happened. During the Great Crusade, they were so lauded and perfect that the Emperor gave them, and only them, permission to bear the Palatine Aquila upon their breast, because they saved the Emperor from some insurgents, and the Emperor liked them very much. They constantly strove for perfection, and anything less was seen as failure. They were loved by the Imperial army men, and they were great leaders. They were truly the embodiment of perfection, and all that the Emperor desired for his Space Marines. They were kind of similar to the Salamanders, I'd say, before Fulgrim came along, and even afterwards, at least with how the humans liked them. Let's see. Once they found Fulgrim, things got a little bit better, because before Fulgrim, they were suffering horribly from a blight within their gene seed and a lot of gene seed-like disasters. But Fabius kind of got them through that. Fulgrim helps them. More on that later. Fulgrim, who leads them, is the Phoenician. He is the most beautiful of the Primarchs, rivaled by Sanguinius, but Fulgrim's all natural, baby. Sanguinius has wings and stuff, so let's get him out of there. He's The Legion was full of sublime swordsmen, many artists, but when they came to the planet of Lair, everything changed and things went downhill. The 4th Legion were the Iron Warriors. They still are the Iron Warriors. They're determined and brutally efficient. Their gene seed was very stable, so they were very numerable in the early times of the Great Crusade and the Unification Wars and all that jazz. And they originally saw very, very good success in the opening stages of the Great Crusade, and they had tons of warriors and lots of fancy war machines. But they never changed their ways throughout the Crusade, as all the other legions kind of adopted their own wacky, fancy combat styles and ways of warfare that were usually fueled by pride a lot of the time more than anything else, and they just were very flashy, depending on the legion, I guess. But the Iron Warriors never changed, which made them very reliable for certain types of warfare, which unfortunately meant the Imperium sent them to kind of the worst war zones to fight in grueling siege battles in very unglorious wars with no attention, really. So nobody gave them any thanks. No one really paid attention to them. The other legions thought they were kind of... they didn't really have any honor because of their ways of attrition, and they just became relentless and apathetic, which only got worse when they met Perturabo, who ordered decimation upon seeing his legion. He would later then send them into grinding and bloody wars, sowing out all of the weakness in them and letting only the strong survive. So they were basically already severed from the Imperium before the Horus Heresy, and they were very much on their own. But I will let Hal begin on the expert section and get into the nitty-gritty of all these things.
Thank you very much, Eli. I'm not gonna lie, my mind is still thinking of the Lorecrimes merch from earlier, and I was thinking because Lorecrimes get jumpsuits and like they have
Oh my gosh,
like things written about
the idea of like all of us in front of like the police, like the grid, the lines with like the you hold up the number and then
oh my god, that'd be pretty
just
good.
Have Lorecrimes. I have some ideas for some designs, so we'll see.
With just like Warhammer quotes written wrong. Like loyalty is its own special discount or something like that. So it's its own reward. Something, all written wrong.
Bring forth the corrupt politicians.
Death to the false clown god or something. Just like a little bit off kilter.
Leave Kegarak alone, bro.
Sorry, but we're not speaking of Lorecrimes merch today. We're speaking of the first few legions in the Great Crusade, and we do begin with the Dark Angels Legion. Obviously, with the return of Lionel Johnson, there's probably quite a few of you who are like, either you're just learning about Warhammer or you're already in it and you kind of like, oh, these guys are getting a lot of love recently, and for good reason, because the Dark Angels Legion were actually the prototype legion formed in the Imperial Palace towards the latter part of the 30th millennium. They would be the very first experimentation with Astartes' gene seed. They were literally the template from which all other legions would be created. And a lot of their recruits that were drawn from the legion, a lot of the other legions, they would draw from like similar places, people from different backgrounds. The first legion, that they're known at the time, they actually had recruits come from all cultures across Terra at the time. They didn't have anything unifying them, so they kind of made their own unique culture within the Legion, which is kind of like a blend of many of the different Terran-born kingdoms that had fallen or capitulated to the rise of the Emperor. In fact, the First Legion, being the First Legion, they had access to many of the tactics, war gear, and intelligence that would be tested first within them and then given to the other legions. So they were very much the testing ground and pretty much the first Astartes that would see open warfare, and obviously the first time humans would come across Astartes and get crunked in battlefields. Not fun for them. And they did, even towards the latter part of the Great Crusade, they still had access to some of the better guns and technology. It's even said they had access to equipment from the Dark Age of technology, which if you are new to Warhammer, that's the time period where it was humanity at their sort of height. This was many millennia before, and so they were given sort of a bit of an edge. A little bit unfair, we could probably say. I'm not sure, but...
Well, I know the rationale was like, we are on stage one of reclaiming the galaxy. We need to give them every advantage they can get to just kill anything, because like it's very much like underreported how much bad stuff there was in the galaxy before the Astartes started like like exterminating,
genociding.
Nasty, and that also like nasty malevolent creatures. Like I know I was just saying before this, listening to the Cathonia Reckoning book, where there's a few Dark Angels involved, and they're talking about like, oh, they have a void cannon. Like, oh, that's dangerous. That they shouldn't have that. That's really that's cataclysmic damage. They should. And they have like vortex guns and all sorts of crazy stuff that you wouldn't see in the current setting. Because imagine the tabletop. Like, I play one Dark Angel. He uses void cannon. I win. You know?
They probably also have the KFC recipe as well. This is not confirmed, but even with their surgery scars still fresh, the First Legion was sent to the field of battle as they took part in the Purge of the Thunder Warriors, which were the previous iteration of Super Soldier created for the Emperor of Mankind. There's a really cool part in the Constantine Valdor book, which is where it's the last sort of attempt of the Thunder Warriors to rebel against the Emperor who's trying to axe them, shall we say. And the Thunder Warriors are described like bears in combat. They're large, stocky, brutal. But the Astartes are described like wolves. They move faster. They're a bit smaller than Thunder Warriors, but their gene seed is much more stable, and they work together in packs, and they kind of tear apart the Thunder Warriors as like literally wolves fighting bears.
Although I've mentioned it before on the podcast, and I love how Ushatan, the Primarch of the Thunder Warriors, is like, they fight like they're constipated. You're like, constipated? Oh, poor Space Marines being like jabbed at.
That guy, that guy's nutty, because his first appearance in lore is like him, Constantine Valdor looking at him, and then he just looks at him and goes, "This is fun." And he's just revving his chainsaw and attacking civilians. Like, oh my god!
Isn't it amazing how everyone who serves the Emperor either gets killed by him or tries to kill him?
That's
almost like he's a bad guy.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't. That's not saying we can.
My heresy detector is twinge. I don't know. Like I'm sensing some heresy here. What's going on?
That's a theory I can't quite tackle now.
Just saying,
spoilers.
Orc and Mork never did anything bad to their followers.
So true.
True.
Too
Unless they're
busy
weak.
headbutting each other.
True.
Even resurrection their followers, don't they? Oh, yeah, that doesn't matter right now.
Or give them
Sorry.
give them visions as well, the blessed visions. But the First Legion at this time now, so they're openly declared in the Imperium, which is only on Terra still. They are simply known as the First Legion because there were no other legions generally at the time, and
Emperor's Angels of Death.
Angels of Death. So over the years of the Unification Wars, their armor and equipment would become more sophisticated, better. With the alliance with the Mechanicum of Mars, they would also get better powered armor. Because at the time, so they don't have quite the powered armor you see in the models on the tabletops, like Mark 6. At the time, they're using much more bare bones stuff. Even their bolters are not as sophisticated. So people often ask, like, why did they not unite Terra very quickly? It's because they didn't have good stuff until they got to the stars, really. And I will start with a first quote here. I think I'm going to hand that to Andy, if you see that in the sidebar chat here. This is a little
I can indeed.
taster of how the Dark Angels are. Take it away.
I do like my Dark Angels. Since the founding of their legion, at the birth of the Imperium, the Space Marines of the Dark Angels have been dreaded by their enemies and held in awe by those they protect. Stubborn and relentless in battle, ever vigilant and zealous in their pursuit of their duties, the Dark Angels are among the Emperor's most faithful servants.
Yes.
Door closed, but that's not my
No,
fault.
it was a mic drop, shall we say. So duty will come up quite a bit with the theme of the Dark Angels, or not quite Dark Angels yet, shall we say. So the First Legion, they now launch to the stars with the Great Crusade. They elect a Grand Master named Hector Kane, because at the time there are no Primarchs, there is simply Astartes and the Emperor. And they start to begin the conquering of the Great Crusade, launching out, fighting horrifying Xenos, non-compliant colonies of mankind. Basically, the kill count starts rising at this point. And for nearly a century, the Legion would fight. Much of it was broken apart into multiple expeditionary fleets because they had such a high number of legionaries. Obviously, being the first one created, they had a lot more. I was say a lot more recruitment, not a lot of love in these death, soldiers, shall we say. And this would all change though when the Legion came across a death world named Caliban. This one, funny enough, very significant. It's going to come up quite a lot. And the death world of Caliban was just an overgrown forested area. And when the Legion came upon it, they descended down, and to their utter shock and also their joy too, they found their Primarch, Lion L. Johnson. And for most other legions, quite a few of them had already found their Primarch. So the Lion was found sort of middle of the pack, and despite being the First Legion, they still considered themselves, many a template and a founder to all the other ones. They didn't have their Primarch for a while, so it's a bit of like a chip on their shoulder, but now they have found their Primarch. And with the return of their Primarch to the Legion, they would literally change forever. They would the recruitment for the Legion would now no longer come from Terra, but from the world of Caliban itself. The Legion was renamed to the Dark Angels, which is after a Calibanite myth, which is so as you can start to see, that Caliban starts to permeate the Legion. Even though they didn't have such a strong and distinct culture like some of the other legions, it's quite common that a lot of the Primarchs would mold the legions, and the Lion was no different. The Lion would also bring in a culture of secrecy to the Legion. So the Dark Angels are quite unique in the sense they have a ranking system, so that accolades and different like prizes not the right word, but like different levels of responsibility are given with different levels of knowledge within the Legion. So some may be a sergeant or a captain, but then the sergeant may have more knowledge about a certain secret set within the Dark Angels. Therefore, he might be of higher rank in certain situations. A little bit confusing, but basically to say there's a certain amount of espionage going on in the background. The Legion also takes on a little bit more of a Celtic Teutonic Knight visual to their armor. I'm actually gonna tap in Colin here a little bit because for some people who might not know Colin, would you like give like a brief rundown of like who the tectonic knights are, just because a little side bit of history here, if anyone doesn't know?
Actual to the Teutonic Knights.
Yeah, actual ones.
I thought you were
no, not
heresy lore.
No, just the real history one.
They were a German group of knights, most famous for their crusades into the Baltic regions and helping to bring Christianity to like Poland, Lithuania, those areas. And also that really cool painting in the battle where the ice is cracking under their feet and the frozen lake.
Battle of Grunwald?
I believe. I think it was that.
Similar to that name.
I will admit it's been a while since I've looked much into the Teutonic Knights. But yeah, Crusaders, just instead of in the Middle East, they were in Eastern Europe. If you'd like the very brief summary of them.
I'll go for it, yeah.
No, I mean that's.
Oh no, that's it. Sorry, my brain.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's been a minute since I've looked into them. That era of history was not quite much my specialty, I'm afraid. But yeah, that's the rough little summary. If you're curious about what's the origin of Teutonic Knights, what are those? German Crusaders who went to Eastern Europe.
They take on
pagans.
They take on quite a few of the like armor styles of this like cultural influence as well. Although it does lean a little bit more on the Celtic side with Caliban itself, so there's a little bit more. Speaking like the powers like the greens, and there's like things with ivy and leaves, and they have certain relations to. This is like a thing I just noticed myself, so it may not be confirmed, but how certain scroll work is made on like the British Isles. It has a similar theme to the castle, the Order in Alderac on Caliban, the part where the lion grows up. So there's a little bit of influence there, but we're not going to get too much into that. The lion also chains the legion, bringing in the hexagrammaton. The as we mentioned earlier in Eli's beginner section there. This was a structure that divided the legion into various wings. I have got them all out. We did actually do a quiz on this, or we should have remembered it by heart. But just a brief rundown. There is the Dreadwing, Ravenwing, Deathwing, Firewing, Ironwing, and the Stormwing protocol. These are not all continue to the modern 40k timeline.
There is an interesting thing, like the Deathwing and the Ravenwing are in the Dark Angels, but for example, the Dreadwing I think is in the Angels of Vengeance, so they kind of split a couple of them off to a couple of their successors. So they exist, but they're in separate chapters.
There's also some smaller orders within the Legion, like as I mentioned earlier. There's ones referred as the Knights of Centaurus, which are charged with keeping certain secrets about the Order. So they have quite a complex structure, the Legion. The Dark Angels now, with their Primarch and Astartes together, they would renew their efforts within the Great Crusade. They would participate in the compliance of Moloch, which is a world that will come up later as we talk about the Great Crusade. But it's a world where the Emperor actually erased the memory of the conquest of this until some of the Primarchs will come across it much later because the world holds significance, but that's spoilers for now. They also participated in the Rangdang Xenocides, which you've mentioned a few times on the channel so far. Oof. This one it's a horrifying conflict of the Rangda, which were like a manipulative race that put like control collars. Praise Carthage. They put
Space Carthage.
Oh, Space Carthage. Praise Carthage. Very much. They had they would use other sentient life to fight their battles, and this was so devastating, as Eli said earlier, that the Dark Angels lost a huge number of Astartes, and there was, even with the Primarch Lionel Johnson, the tactical genius that he was, they still couldn't. There was just no way around it. They had to fight and get stuck in, and it was the biggest war throughout the Great Crusade, and it sort of shifted the balance of legions after. So now the Ultramarines and Sons of Horus were now the most numerous after that one. The Legion also battled in the subjugation of Sarosh. This was a planet they believed to be compliant, but they were tricked. People of Sarosh had feigned compliance in a way, and they said they wanted to speak to the Primarch, but it was actually an assassination attempt on the Lion. They try to get
I just like when they get there and the White Scars have been trying it for a while and they're just like, you do it. Like this is infuriating. They're like, oh, I want to join, but I don't know. And the White Scars are like, later losers, we're going to go somewhere else and do something useful because this is just boring.
Later losers, we're going shopping. That's it, confirmed from Jagatai Khan. So the Soroshi almost successfully detonate a nucleonic bomb within the Legion's flagship with the Lion there. But this was prevented by the figure Luther and Zahariel. Luther was the adopted father of the Lion, and he almost let it happen. Because there was some jealousy of him growing up and the Lion obviously being so far above him. But the Legion was spared any horrific damage, and they didn't have time to think about it. So they just descended to the world very quickly, and they found this horrifying Xenos creature that the people had been enslaved to, and they had been feeding the bodies of like basically the Imperial delegates who had come, and like thousands upon thousands of dead. So it was like a horrifying psychic creature, which they did use a psychic bomb to annihilate, but it kind of changed the Legion after this, as we said earlier in Eli's part, the trust between Luther and the Lion was broken, and the Lion himself, and so much secrecy involved in the Legion, some level of trust the level of trust wasn't there anymore to a certain degree, and so parts of the Legion were sent back to Caliban to be recruiters, which would then cause trouble. But that's something we'll talk about in its own video, I'm sure, the events on Caliban. The Legion then went to battle with the Crave, which they'd previously fought a little bit in the Rangdan Xenocide. They were the Crave. They were
Space 2?
They were held by the Rangda. Actually had part of control of some Crave, so they had come across the Crave a little bit, the Dark Angels, but they had come now to the Ghoul Stars to confront the. I'm going to screw his name up. It's the Autarch. It's Autarch Thonar. It's Autarch? A very. I can't remember how to pronounce this one. It's a difficult name. No, this one is a unique Xenos, but it's actually an ancient weapon created, supposedly, people suspect, in the time of the War in Heaven, so a very long time ago. And this weapon...
So it probably is an Eldar thing.
It might be, but this weapon's thing is it actually births the Crave, which are kind of... Just seeing the actual image of a Crave, they kind of look like vampire, like the proper, almost transformed vampire, so very bat-like, which I didn't realize.
The only thing is, whenever you mention Crave, it just makes me think of that terrible cereal brand.
Oh my god, filled with chocolate, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like the marketing is that they like run after you and shoo at you, and I'm like, that's weirdly fitting. Like, and then the Crave happened. You're like, get it away.
Terrible cereal. Crave is delicious.
I know. No. I tried it. I was like, "Oh, this is." Ugh.
Oh, Lorecrimes full. Comment below if you like Dr. Pepper or ginger ale. And
it's Dr. Pepper. You say ginger ale.
Can someone explain the lore behind this?
I've never had
contention.
Yeah, Eli's Canadian, and Canadians have shit taste in soda.
Oh god. Spicy takes.
I'm fly. I'm booking my plane ticket to America right now.
Thing is, I like the taste of Dr. Pepper, but it gives me an upset stomach, so I'm gonna have to go with ginger ale just on principle.
Nice.
I think
Dr. Pepper. All the way.
Coming back to England. Yeah.
But with that being said, they do manage to destroy the Crave. The Crave, I don't want to say it again, but basically the thing that makes the Crave, the Xenos weapon / sentient being. It's quite a sad bit because one of the legionaries sacrifices his life to blow up the Crave's nest, and it creates like a psychic backlash that allows the Lion to basically throttle the thing, basically, annihilate it. With this, though, the Legion now return. The Lion returns mostly intact, sort of back to the Legion, and the Legion is battling in the Shield Worlds region, and this is where they would learn of the rebellion of Horus.
I bet that was a Old One's creation, actually, because the Old Ones created a whole lot of species during that time to fight the Necrons.
Possibly.
It's the dynasties.
They don't specify though who created the origin Crave Xenos thing.
Yeah, but they also don't say technically who the warp entity Magnus talked to give up his eye to. They don't technically say who it was. I think we can guess.
It's just
I don't know.
a general imply that it's ancient, very, very ancient. But with that,
I mean, if you ask me, I think they were just craving a bit of attention.
I hate that. With that being
Space
said,
Marine
though,
fans.
we should obviously mention, because someone might be like, "Huh, that doesn't make sense." The Second Legion, redacted from history. All we know was they possibly participated in the Rangdan Xenocides, and then they were erased from history. Second Primarch. We've mentioned some previous lore in our Primarch videos about the Second Primarch, but essentially, as the Second Legion, there's no real true information, unfortunately. Did you have something to say, Colin?
He was arrogant, he was humorless and possibly hypocritical.
That's all we have, unfortunately.
According to Fulgrim talking about him.
Well, speaking of Fulgrim, Eli, it's time to talk about the prettiest boy in all of the legions. I hand it over to Eli.
Sanguinius.
Oh,
Hey, get out of here.
No.
Who's dead? Who's dead? What? Huh? Who's dead?
He lives on in my heart. I go to bed with a framed picture of him, and I kiss him.
I'll give that maybe Sanguinius in his best moments might have been a bit more fabulous, but Fulgrim was definitely the prettiest.
All natural, baby.
I don't know about that one.
All right. I guess I will talk about the Emperor's Children. Feel free to pitch in whenever I miss anything, because my brain has been completely inside of Warhammer 40k and not 30k lately. I love the Necrons, but we're not talking about Necrons today. So the Emperor's Children primarily came from Europa for their gene stock of Space Marines. They were all nobles and aristocrats. So they were all already very regal and noble and good at leading, which is one reason why they put them with the Imperial Guard so much and kind of divvied them up, sort of like the Mentors chapter, for small units of Space Marines kind of supporting Imperial Guard, leading their offensives and operations. And in this way, the Imperial Guard loved them. They really looked up to, or the Imperial Army, I guess not the Guard at the time, but they loved the Emperor's Children and really looked up to them. And the Emperor's Children were prided and lauded about being so nice and honorable, perfect, humble, all the good stuff, because they're so great. They were the only legion, like we said before, to be given the right to bear the Palatine Aquila, because they protected the Emperor against some insurrectionists fighting to the last man with valor that the Emperor had never seen before. The Emperor was wounded by a vortex weapon, I believe, is the lore behind that, and they fought alongside the Custodes to protect him. And in this way, they were kind of given a title and a reputation that they felt that they needed to live up to. So they really strived to be absolutely perfect and to be the best, because they were literally the Emperor's Children. Out of all the Space Marine legions, it was only them who were given the right to wear this Aquila until after the Horus Heresy, where I'm pretty sure all the Space Marines have it, but that doesn't really count.
So you're basically saying they just basically went, "Notice me, Senpai," until he did, and then they were really
It
happy.
worked. And it worked.
Yeah, it worked.
They were small in number, like I said, so they were spread out on missions of diplomacy, and kind of acting as escorts even, and bodyguards to important imperial diplomats and nobles.
Good for them.
Yeah, it was a good time. They weren't really like the other legions as much. They weren't quite as feral and bloodthirsty as a lot of the Space Marines. They didn't see quite as much action, I'd say, because there wasn't as many of them. But I think at the time you could literally say they were the best legion, because there was only a few at this point. So I think it's
Wasn't
fair
it
to
the
say
case that they were drawn from the defeated ruling empire, the sons of the defeated rulers of Terra? So when the Emperor was like, "I'm killing this uprising of this big army. Oh, you're now part of the Imperium. Your son, who would have been the king in your place, is now an Emperor's Children," and that's why there were so few, because they were all, like you said, aristocrats, but they were also the bloodlines of proud peoples who were all having their little kingdoms.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Unfortunately for the Third Legion, disaster strikes when a ship of all their gene seed mysteriously disappears and is later found 10,000 years later with trays in the infinite. But that deals a large blow to their numbers already, and worse than this, the rest of their gene seed basically gets corrupted by the flesh blight, which takes a very long time to weed out of the Emperor's Children in general, as Fabius Bile, not chief apothecary at the time, but might as well have been, spent all of his days at that time like literally just killing his brothers, unfortunately. So most of the Legion was called to get rid of the Blight, and it did kind of work. The Blight stopped, but there's only 200 guys left, and Fabius Bile technically still had the Blight, but he didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, it's briefly mentioned in his books, isn't it? He's like, oh no, here it comes again. I've got another case of the Blight.
Thankfully, I'm the doctor, and I can forge the records.
Well, he's just like, I'm just going to make another body for myself and go in that until that's taken by the Blight and just ad nauseum do that. Why not?
Yeah, Fabius is basically the main character of the Emperor's. I think I could say Fabius is the main character of Chaos Space Marines at this point.
There's a really good part. I had to ask if everyone feels the same way, but there's a part he mentions, I think, in the Fabius books, isn't it? When he talks to Trezin, is it Trezin the Infinite? And he says, I think Trezin says to him, which one was the real like Fabius? Because is the real Fabius the one who technically the original body that has died, and are you even the same consciousness? You know, is the actually Fabius Bile really dead, and you're just like a echo of the real man or something? There's like an interesting sort of theory on that.
Coming from a Necron.
Yes, true.
True.
I do like. I think in the Inquisition game, he's like the final boss, and he's just like,
"Oh yeah,
I'm Fabius," and you're like, "Oh, well, he's not that one. That one's weird."
I never got into that game. That sounds cool.
It's a Diablo clone.
Yeah, that's why I didn't.
I've never played it, but I've seen the cutscene, and he's just like, "I'm Fabius." Tee hee hee hee. And you're like, oh, he's going full like mustache twirling villain mode. Brilliant.
Nice. Jeez, Fabius Bile books are epic. You should read them if you have not read them yet, or listen to them.
But first, you should read Infinite and the Divine.
Or Twice-Day King. Actually, consume all Necron propaganda that you can.
It's only like 4 books. It's fine.
Divine, not even propaganda. It's an old married couple going at it for 10,000 years.
This is all propaganda from the deceiver. Do not listen to Eli.
Glory to Zerek. Glory to the dynasties.
The warriors of the war in heaven shall rule the galaxy.
All flesh shall crumble before the might of the all the unclean lesser beings.
You're gonna hate a line in the Infinite Divine. I promise I'll shut up about the Infinite Divine after this. You're gonna hate a line from Orican though. It's not plot important, but he's so it's not too much.
I know Orkin's not happy about the transference. He said to not do it in the beginning.
He's fighting some Eldar, and he admits that both them and the Necrons are perfect in their own way. In their own respective way.
You know, I'll give him that. I like the Eldar. I'm okay with that. But everyone else is not so lucky. Anyways, back to 10,000 years before that stuff happened. They found Fulgrim on the beautiful world of Chemos. I think it's Chemos. It's a place of wonderful efficiency and art where people have plenty of time to pursue their hobbies and passions because of Fulgrim's work to make the once barren, dying planet into this efficient paradise where he basically just repaired all the machines and made everything nice and better so that people didn't have to work as much. Is this where you want to come in, Hal? Is this your thing?
There is the part where he does do that famous speech. Do you want to mention that very quickly? When he gets reunited with his legion. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know.
I think I know.
I can say that. I can say it. Well, basically,
can we just find the speech as is.
Oh no,
out there?
I think there is a speech out there. We don't have it on hand, unfortunately. But
okay, I'm lacking.
That's all good. When Fulgrim does get reunited with his legion, he only finds 200 warriors, I think.
Yeah, it's 200 fellas, and I think he kneels before them though, which is cool.
He does, and he gives like such a heartfelt speech. I think even the Emperor approves and says it was really, I'm not the word like worthy, but it was such a good speech that he gave to his 200 sons. I think it says he speaks to them as if they were a full legion because they feel very like ashamed because they found their Primarch and there's only 200 of them left because of all the blight and the
treason.
Yeah, pretty much. So they feel very embarrassed, but now Fulgrim is reunited with his legion. This is a good time for the legion because they start to basically repair and they can source actual gene seed from Fulgrim so they can rebuild the legion. And this begins the events of Fulgrim just taking over his legion. And one of the first acts he would do he would lead his legion to the world of Byzas. And this was very significant in the legion's early career because Fulgrim declared that he would conquer this world with only 7 men. And everyone's probably thinking, oh, that makes sense because Fulgrim's arrogant as hell. But this is the young Fulgrim still, and his actual true reasoning for this is he has a certain amount of fear for his legion because a lot of the time they had been previously used as champions, as I mentioned. And he fears that the legion would essentially be sacrificed and broken apart because they're just seen as like a lesser legion. Like they're just useful for being involved in the Imperial Guard. And so he wants to make a name for the legion in a way so he can keep what would now be the growing legion sort of united together. And he's so he's not doing it for selfish reasons. And the world of Byzas is essentially just, it's not a very advanced world, but this would be like the first time when the Legion would bring together basically Terran recruits and some of the like first Camosian recruits together, and they would descend down this planet, which is similar to Earth in a way. There's kind of kingdoms, and their technology is somewhat slightly advanced from what we have today. And Fulgrim finds himself quickly immersed in the middle of like a political game. He's not launched. There's many times people question throughout why he hasn't launched the entire Third Legion, but again, he's trying to prove a point, and he's trying to set a standard, which is, my Legion are amazing. They do not need to be broken apart. That I won't allow it to happen. And there's actually a really amazing scene where Fulgrim and the Emperor's children, they are walking through the streets of Byzas, and obviously they're seeing this superhuman demigod in ornate, beautiful armor, and his warriors in gleaming, purples and golds. And there's a little bit of a divide within the Legion at this time, because there are some who, they are the previous Terran veterans, and they're Terrans, they are noble warriors, but they're kind of nobles. And the Camosians are seen as, or they see themselves sort of more like, not as in they are nobles, but they see themselves like that. And there's a little bit of discrepancy, and then many don't like Fabius Bile at the time because he's not a very beautiful man, unfortunately.
They're already calling him the Spider.
Yeah, they call him the Spider. Even some of them start to make the mistake of thinking, like, people try to touch their armor in the crowd, and one of them's like, "Get off me, don't touch me."
Get off my lovely armor.
And Fulgrim is not happy with this, because Fulgrim delivers like a speech to his own men, telling him about his humble upbringing, how he'd work in the mines until his fingers were bloody, and he blisters all over, even as a Primarch. So you're thinking, what the hell? They can heal very quickly. I think that's even his Primarch ability. He can heal quicker than some of the other Primarchs. And he speaks to them about how he's not dressed in all this finery, and he doesn't look the part because he thinks he's amazing. He does this because he wants to show people he can elevate humanity to a certain level, and that's what his warriors, his Emperor's children, are meant to do. They're meant to be the example to show how humanity, even the people who have, like him, dust and bloody fingers, they can still be elevated and risen up. And it's a very touching scene when it's written. Hopefully I'll get that voice acted one day in a Fulgrim video, because that was so good. But the events on Byzas essentially lead to the politics and the different factions trying to assassinate Fulgrim many times. There's a part where they try and attack him in the middle of the street, and he full on, Primarch full sprints chasing down. That's terrifying. And they even
he's not at all bothered, because they try to they shoot at the guy he's politicking with, and he just kind of shields him with his mass, and it just, all the shots are just pinging off his arm, and he's like, oh, okay, and he's like, you can all surrender if you like, and they're like, no, and then he has to it's quite amusing, that book. I quite enjoyed it, to be honest.
It's got some wacky moments to it. It's also showing...
And the bit where he's just drinking the wine, and he's like, is that radiation? It's like, yeah, the grapes are irradiated, so it's got a bit of a bitter twang. He's like, oh,
yeah, they keep trying to kill him throughout, and his warriors are like, dude, chill. There's even a part where they try and lead him to like a cathedral monastery area, and try and blow him up, which he manages to successfully evade. But
he's like, oh, Ferrus used to teach me how to dismantle nuclear bombs. That sounds familiar, that noise. Wait a minute, that's a bomb noise. And you're like, huh? Okay.
Yeah, he gets a little bit arrogant. I think there's a poignant part where I think one of the Remembrancers said she can tell that he's masquerading his arrogance in a way like all the Emperor's children sort of play the part of, like, the refined warrior, but she wonders if one day it will become the real thing because if he starts to believe his own lie. So there's a funny little hint there. But eventually Fulgrim and his warriors manage to fend off an attack on the city that they are currently residing in. They defeat the rebels and they bring the world into compliance with only 7 men, although some of them get very roughed up during it, so they're not doing it. And then it also leads to Byzas becoming a recruitment world because the Emperor's children, again, they've had their numbers been decimated for so long that they just need to build up their numbers quickly. And this is where, again, Byzas is now part of the recruitment pool. And I will hand it back to Eli to talk about what the Emperor's Children did the rest of the Great Crusade.
Can I mention one other thing before we move on from that book? I like how it also mentions that, like, Fulgrim has been married several times when he was in Chemos, and he's obviously, like, he ages very slowly compared to other people, and it's just like, did you love them? And he's like, some, I think, at first. Like, like, of all the Primarchs, like, there's, like, a lot of people go, Space Marines are virgins, and, Primarchs especially, but it's like, Fulgrim, he fucks because he's been around.
I'm not sure if it implies that. I thought it was like political marriages.
He's been married several times. You're like, maybe.
I think
he's had ladies.
It's implied that it's
4
more
women.
Go on train. It's implied that they're more like political marriages. I thought how they tie in different groups, like how like they just marry people together, but then they don't. Obviously, he's so far above a human, it doesn't count really. Also, you get
like
the Perturabo. Like, imagine marrying Perturabo.
Iron within, iron without.
Fulgrim was laying pipe.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I'll hand it back to Eli very quickly though to tell you the rest of the Emperor's Children Great Crusade.
Oh man, pre-heresy Fulgrim lore makes me so sad every time. He was so awesome. It feels so freaking bad, dude. It'd be like if Gilman or Sanguinius fell to chaos. It'd be like
a Gilman would never.
MFs you would never think of falling to chaos. It's just such a feels bad.
I know.
You're like, I can't believe Fulgrim had wives. How dare he?
Oh, that's not
I think it's the scene with the it's a scene in the when he's like being very humble because he was actually very humble initially.
Yeah,
he tried
awesome.
he tried to keep his legion humble too, but that didn't
one
work.
freaking sword ruined it all.
Plot.
Bad sword.
Should have listened to Eldred.
Yep. He almost did, to be fair. But the sword ruined it. Oh well, whatever. Anyways, so he did that stuff and it was all super nice. They were still very small legion though. Too small to kind of go out on the Great Crusade by themselves, so Horus ended up mentoring Fulgrim and his legion. So the legion spent a lot of time with the Luna Wolves and created a very good brotherly bond and friendship that was only second to Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim was friends with lots of his brothers. I think most of them generally liked him up until things started to get iffy, which, obviously. But him and Horus worked together for quite a while, and they fought on Murder together, if I remember correctly. I don't actually know if Fulgrim was on Murder. I think it was just
he does appear slightly, listen, he gets summoned by Horus because Horus is not impressed with what some of the Emperor's children do on Murder.
Yeah, the Legion kind of started to be, the Space Marines started to get pretty arrogant and jerky. Eidolon, Lord Commander Eidolon, was even like boasting about how great they were on Murder and how wonderful the Emperor's children were, but in reality they were actually saved by the Luna Wolves, I'm pretty sure. I kept thinking that the Blood Angels were there too, but apparently
the Blood Angels were there originally, and then they're like annihilated, and they find like all the Blood Angels' corpses like in the trees.
Okay, so I'm remembering correctly.
They're in the trees.
Murder was infested by these very scary bug things. That's kind of like all I remember. I don't know if there was much more to say about it, honestly. Yeah. Big scary bugs, not the Tyranids, just actual like chitinous bugs, stuff like that. It was not a great time, but you know what? They got through it and they learned, and they're still friends with the Luna Wolves, so everything's okay. They also fought against the Diasporex, I think, with the Iron Hands, which is one of the reasons why they were friends with them. The main reason for the friendship, though, of course, is the classic story of Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim becoming best buddies, making weapons together, and then giving each other the weapons that they made. Fulgrim even gave Ferrus his nickname of the Gorgon, and they have a very nice relationship throughout the entire Great Crusade, which all goes away when bad things happen, but it's okay. Whatever. As arrogant as they were still lots of really nice guys in the Legion, like Saul Tarvitz. He was a cool dude. And the one guy that Fulgrim killed on the statue, whose name I don't remember anymore. But there were plenty of nice guys in the Legion.
Damn.
And they were... Sorry, guy.
Wasn't there a guy called Julius as well? Julius
Caesar.
Yeah, he was quite a noble.
Wow, what a subtle name.
Yeah, as a bit of an overt reference to slightly Greco-Roman things, which is sad because I thought
they're the Phoenicians.
Hopefully there'll be a bit more of a. We have explained slightly what the Phoenicians are, I think, in a previous episode, but we'd hope that that slightly proto-Carthaginian vibe would come through a bit more. But
well, Julius was the first captain as well, so he was like a big player in the Legion.
They still have cool armor though, very cool armor.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Emperor's Children started to get very obsessed with perfection and were masters of swordsmanship and war in general. A lot of them pursued the arts like painting and poetry. But overall, the Legion was very skilled. I think their biggest weakness was probably their individualistic manner, because they were also practicing to be perfect themselves. They had maybe kind of neglected the teamwork aspect and all that. Not as a whole, I think just in general, though. And, of course, their pursuit of perfection would indeed be their undoing in the end, so, whatever. But they were really epic for a time. Their fleets were bastions of the arts. They had tons of remembrancers in them, probably more than everyone else, I think. Yep. Or at least they treated them better than everyone else for the most part.
Yeah.
And the remembrancers practiced the arts as well. Acting, music, sculpting, painting, and the likes. They held performances within the ships, which there was one special performance that didn't go so well. We're not at that part yet.
Spoilers. Heresy spoilers.
But yeah, compared to all the other legions, I think the Emperor's Children, as arrogant as they had become, they still kept a good degree of their humanity, probably alongside guys like the Salamanders and the White Scars and the likes. So they were liked by the Remembrancers. Not all the Space Marines liked them, because some of the Space Marines still thought the arts were dumb and wanted to put all of their efforts into just being perfect at war. And I mean, it worked out for them. There were a lot of good commanders and a lot of good swordsmen. But like I said earlier, they were kind of glory hungry, which fueled a lot of pride and led to conflict and not great things. But heroes arose from the Legion like Saul Tarvitz, Eidolon, you could say, I guess. Lucius was definitely a popular guy until... what's his name? Holy frick. The Luna Wolves guy, the main character of the Horus
Garviel
Loken. Till Garviel Loken punched him in the face, and then that was...
and Torgadon also humbled Eidolon during the Battle of Murder, and like Eidolon's messing everything up, and then the Luna Wolves drop, and Torgadon's like, right, you're doing what I'm saying, you're useless. And then Eidolon's like, we did amazing. And he's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah. Eidolon was like the top douchebag of the Emperor's Children. Then Lucius, he was like mid-tier douchebag, and Tarvitz was like zero douchebag. He was a really nice guy.
They named a planet Murder. Come on.
I mean, it's not the real name. It's just what they nicknamed it, because they're like, that place is
full of murder. It was horrible.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the main battles of the Great Crusade, though. There's the Diasporax were neat because they had the time warping weapons, if I remember correctly. Or is that not them? Was that them? I'm pretty sure that was them.
The Diasporax are the ones where they have Yeah, that's the Hrad. I think the Diasporax are the ones with they're human and aliens that traveled in like a spacefaring fleet. They even had some like old like Terran, proto-Terran like ships from back when Terran was a colony.
And it's like they go through the murder system and they've like triggered a beacon, so then they turn up and go, what are you guys doing here? It's like, oh, is that your stuff? Who are you? Yeah, and
if I remember correctly, Fulgrim and the lads actually save Ferris because he kind of gets a little too headstrong and
he throws himself in.
I think, and that Ferris wasn't very happy about that, but Fulgrim did save his life. I'm pretty sure. So after that, though, probably the main event for the Emperor's Children and their whole storyline throughout all of Warhammer is they came to the planet of Lair, an ocean world with lots of different islands of coral, big giant coral structures, and it was ran by these snake-like fishy beings they were very muscular, multi-armed for the most part, but I think their most important thing about the species is that they were all genetically modified to fit certain roles, which Fabius found out about and took a very big interest in and tried to tell Fulgrim that they should do that too. And Fulgrim at first was like, nah, bro, that's cringe. But then with like 2 extra words of prodding, Fabius convinced him, and Fulgrim said, yeah, okay, we should do that.
Do it.
Like
Do it.
He said no
I like the idea.
balls.
Yeah,
I like the idea of
literally.
him having like prototypes. It's like, check this out. You know the fish people, right? Hear me out. Marine. He can breathe underwater. It's like that's okay. I'll come back in a minute. He's just like, it's got 5 arms. Like Fabius, no, like you're being weird. And then like, oh, you can shriek. Eidolon can do a big scream. Oh, that's useful. Okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe.
So yeah, exactly. The Fabius convinced Fulgrim that it was part of their pursuit of perfection to get closer to the Emperor, which of course at first Fulgrim said the Emperor's work is perfect, but then Fabius kind of convinced him a little bit otherwise and started to seed some doubts in Fulgrim's mind. And if it wasn't the Lair Blade, then it was definitely Fabius who kind of ruined everything for the Legion as he started to modify the Battle Brothers and make these stimulant cocktails from the alien species. It was all around just a bad thing to do. But
To
whatever.
be fair, the Lair species were also worshipping Slanesh, and they had temples,
Yeah.
and they were kind of like infused with it. So like either way, it's all Lair. It's Lair-based corruption.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the Space Marines didn't know about Slanesh because somebody didn't tell them. And so Fulgrim goes into this Lair
Some
temple.
absolute goober.
Yeah. Fulgrim goes into the final Lair temple that the people of Lair were like dying en masse to defend this one last place, the bastion of their people. And all the Lair were, making out and
It's
reproducing.
really
we can say.
odd scene, isn't it? It's really sensual. And
Just
like,
making out.
Yeah, there was a lot of fish people, or slimy, slithery snake fish people embraced doing their thing. And Fulgrim sees a cool sword in the middle of it and thinks, wow, this is really pretty. And he takes the sword. And I don't know, the end. That's it. Everything sucks after that. But whatever. He takes the sword and he starts hearing some weird voices in his head, but doesn't figure out as a sword till later because demons don't exist, silly guy. Whatever.
And then a certain elf had said, "Hey, don't pick up the sword.
I'm
Don't
getting
pick up."
there, but it was too late. You already picked up the sword.
I do like that. He's always getting involved in every time the Primarch's like, go away. Go. I don't want to hit. Like, he went to Ferris, he went to Fulgrim. They're like, no, shoo. We know what we're doing.
So after Lair, Fulgrim goes and meets up with Eldrad Ulthran of the Ulthway Craft World in a sort of parley. And Eldrad tells Fulgrim the unthinkable that his brother Horus is going to betray the Emperor and he's going to doom the galaxy to an eternity of war. And at first, Fulgrim's mad, but then he comes to his senses and he's like, oh, well, maybe this guy's right. He showed me some stuff. Maybe I should believe him. But then the sword at his side speaks in his head. And Fulgrim thinks that the sword's thoughts are like his own thoughts at this point. He can't really distinguish between the two. And the sword, unfortunately, convinces him otherwise. And he attacks Eldrad. And when Eldrad sees the sword, he realizes it's far too late anyways. He kills some Eldar. He 1v1s an Avatar of Cain and beats it up with his bare hands. Classic.
He choked out a metal statue. They don't need air.
He punches it in the face and
I know,
he
you get
takes
enough
the W.
Ultramarine Primaris, they can take out Avatar of Cain. It's not a big deal. It's fine.
Listen, that short took place after 3 days of nonstop, constant battle. If it panned 10 feet to the left, you'd see the mountain of Smurf corpses.
Floating Ultramarines are coming for you. The animation, there's too few frames. They're still in the air. They're gonna get you. They're gonna get you.
We need to give all of them helmets to save on the budget.
Jeez, feels bad. But yeah, the Emperor's Children with Fulgrim also destroy some Eldar, and we see Fabius's influence on the chapter as Mr. Eidolon screams really loud at a wave serpent and literally destroys a tank. That's cool. And Lucius picks up a Howling Banshee sword and decides that it's pretty cool, so he got a new toy, and he's dual wielding now. That's cool stuff. But everything after that sucks so freaking much. It's such a I get so sad every time I think about it. But I mean, at the end of the Great Crusade, before the big no happens, Fulgrim goes to talk with Horus, and he kind of already feels like he knows what it's going to be about, and he thinks about Eldrad's words, and he gets all the weapons ready on the Emperor's Children flagship, which name I unfortunately have forgotten. But he's
The Pride
pointing
of
it.
the Emperor.
Sure. I guess
There's Andronicus, and then there's the Pride of the Emperor is their biggest one. I know that much.
I know the Vengeful Spirit, and that's about all I can give you. But he has his weapons primed at the Vengeful Spirit, and he's literally about to issue the command and kill Horus and literally end the Horus heresy before it even happens. And then Eidolon strolls up and is like, "Sire, you forgot your sword." And then Fulgrim picks up his sword, and all thoughts of destroying Horus disappear conveniently. And our hero does not become the hero. He becomes quite the opposite. But that is the end of the Great Crusade for the Emperor's Children. If I missed anything, please forgive me.
No,
What
it's
you're
right on the
saying
money.
is, even though it's probably Fabius's fault, we'll just say it's Eidolon's fault because that's easier.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Fabius was at fault for the Legion falling as a whole, I'd say. Actually, the Lair Temple, whatever, it's stupid.
But without if Dickhead didn't come in with a sword, or if nothing else, even if Fulgrim didn't win, would have been a whole lot of dead Luna Wolves.
Yep. Yes, it would be.
You wonder why I don't read the Horus Heresy, because my faction's main battle tank got killed by a guy yelling at it.
That's right. 60 million years of technology can't beat a rock.
Some dude really loud. God, thank you very much, CS Godo.
So okay, sorry.
I was gonna say, even in the Necron books, because we're going. This is not Horus Heresy related. Sorry, but they get shot with a big bullet from one of the Imperial ships, and it talks about how the quantum shielding was made to resist the forces of like literal gods and star-ending technology, but it wasn't made with the intent to block a piece of rock being thrown at it, basically. So it doesn't work as well in the 40th millennium.
Orcs are the true masters, though, isn't it? Orcs just win because of how dumb it is. Well,
yeah.
Speaking of
dumb and stupid.
Speaking of dumb and stupid, we have if someone's favorite legion.
I like the Iron Warriors. Not my favorite, but I like them.
Well, we are speaking of the last one, the Iron Warriors, which are the 4th Legion. And they were birthed, again, in the Gene Labs of Terror. They were recruited from the warlike gun tribes, or the Blood Reavers, the Tech Enclaves, as they were called at the time. And this sort of infused with the early legions, like, culture. They had a little bit more of, like, a little bit of bloodiness to them already, a little bit war hungry, but then they had some within the Legion who were quite tech savvy, if that's the right word. And they, luckily for the 4th Legion, they benefited from particularly stable gene seed compared to a lot of the others. So if some people are new to Warhammer, when they make Space Marines, sometimes it just, even if the gene seed takes and they put in the new organs to the growing recruit, sometimes it just doesn't straight up work, and the recruit will just basically be like a flopping mess and it will die. So
the recruit will go all floppy.
Yeah. There's one like the Ragnar Blackmane like first book where they just get turned into Space Marines, and they just said they're at like dinner table once, and one of the Space Marines just goes, "What?" And he just basically slumps in his chair, and they said, "Yep," because the gene seed just went wrong.
That's a great noise. Like, and what was his last words?
Great way to go. Get to boop.
Just like a noise of like trying to hold in a fart, like, and then that's it. That's you done.
The One Piece is real, he shouted at the height of his lungs. God. I was thinking actually about, the Eidolon part where he screams, it's literally the note from Tenacious D. We are no, it's the we are but men rock. Ha! That one like really loud.
Yeah. Where he goes in the film, he goes, ah, and then the guy's head explodes. Like, sorry, I didn't mean to blow your mind.
If they made a point of saying it was the that note from Initial D, all would be forgiven.
True.
That would rock anyone's world.
But right now it's just known as in-law. It's in-law brown note. But speaking of 4th Legion, though, so the gene seed of the 4th Legion was particularly stable. They even showed a higher adaptability to bionics. They had shared in common with the 10th Legion. So a lot of times Space Marines, even though they're wearing like ceramite armor, limbs get broken, cut off all the time. So they would, there's like basically the Mechanicum of Mars had like whole fleets of people just with like spare limbs essentially ready for them to just slap on anytime. And the 4th Legion during the Unification Wars, as Eli mentioned earlier, were known for their stubbornness. They would bear through battles and conflicts all the way to the bitter end, even when maybe it didn't make such tactical sense to do so. They seemed to have a bit of a problem with retreating from battle.
Oh.
And this would
always like, like Eli was saying about like the Emperor's Children, they're always like trying to refine their tactics and change things and do some nuance. Like Iron Warriors is like, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, and we don't break. And that was them. Like, just throw enough of us at the problem, we'll sort it out, even if eventually 90% of us die.
It'll go away.
Yeah, they're like meat grinder, basically.
Shared that probably a little bit with the World Eaters in common. Sorry, the Word Eaters, as someone said at the beginning.
The wordy beaters, yeah.
The word beaters. Oh god. The tactics that they somewhat just use again and again on Terror. They would take to the stars with the launch of the Great Crusade, but again, this is where that, as I just said, the tactics kind of hit funny enough, a dead end where a lot of times they didn't adapt to the enemies that they were fighting. They were just kind of known for throwing themselves at people. And so if other Primarchs with their legions who had already been reunited with their Primarchs were using them in tandem with their legion, they would often just use them as like the frontline troops, and they had to adapt around them, being their flankers, being their, espionage or whatever, because the 4th Legion are doing the one thing they do well, and they're not doing anything else. They make one good meal, and that's it.
And there's like some legions really don't like them. Like I think there's like a bit where the Iron Hands work with them. Like, you're stupid. And they're like, we're not stupid. You're stupid. It's like, we got a Primarch. And they're like, it's like
ouch, ouch,
mean.
Especially with like Ferris being like one of the first 3, and then it takes ages for Perturabo to show up. And they're like, we're cool. We got Iron as well.
Speaking of Perturabo, though, we would find it would be over a century of war when the 4th Legion would finally be reunited with their Primarch, Perturabo, from the planet of Olympia. Now, Olympia is, we're just going to say it now, it's basically discount Greece, essentially.
Couldn't tell from it being one step over, one syllable away from Olympus.
Yeah, for Colin, if you want to illuminate people, which particular time period, obviously we all know, but just if you are new to Warhammer, what kind of time period / history would you say that they are inspired from? I think it's
probably ancient Greece, the city states. Although that also being said, I don't know what Olympia was like. Was it city states?
Yep, city states pretty much.
Then yes, it was the Greek city states.
There's a few like Sparta, obviously, Macedon, Athens, all that kind of stuff.
I think ancient Athens sucks.
Yeah, well, we're pro-Spartan over here. But
they also suck, but Athens really sucked.
Epirus. There's a very much a sort of divided nature of Olympia, which was reunited and I say reunited. It was forced together by Perturabo himself because there was no choice with Perturabo. And where most reunions of Legion and Genefather was quite a big momentous moment, such as like Sanguinius and meeting his Legion, which there was like amazing speeches, Fulgrim meeting his sons, and again, like, saying to them, like making a vow to them in front of the Emperor. Lionel Johnson kind of treating his Legion as, well, actually, Lionel Johnson doesn't even call them his sons. He calls them his little brothers, so he treats them like equals. Perturabo the 4th Legion did not get the same treatment. And because Perturabo examined the combat records of his Legion and he found them wanting. They had so many casualties due to obviously the way they battled across the Great Crusade. And he decided there needed to be like a rebirth and a culling of this weakness, and not say to get rid of stubbornness, but the stubbornness needed to be reforged into a different thing. And this brought again the practice of decimation to the Legion. This was something I think practiced I'm not sure if in ancient Greece, but in ancient Rome. Do you know, Colin? I think it was practiced by the Romans.
Well, I believe it. I believe it was the ancient Romans. It was the process of getting rid of 1 out of 10.
Yes. So by lottery, 1 in every 10 of the legionaries was chosen, and he was beaten to death by his own comrades.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was the Romans to keep order in the military.
And to,
By the way,
Okay.
on that point, can I ask to clear something up?
I already
I've
know.
had so many freaking comments saying I'll use like decimation as a term, as like a vague term, and then I'll have someone in my comments going, "No, decimation is only 1 in 10 people."
Right?
Like,
Oh my
no,
god, dude.
it's a historical
So annoying.
term, and it's also a situational term. It can be used for both. Stop bullying me in the comments because.
If Andy, may I speak on your behalf? Well, how about I'll give my opinion on the matter. I won't speak on your behalf. The people who say that, you are technically correct. Yes, the original meaning of decimation was by the Romans to have their comrade take out 1 in 10 of them as a punishment and to keep order. That being said, if you leave that comment in a comment section, you're a fucking nerd.
oh, ultimate payback. That was it.
Well, I mean,
no
all I'm looking
correction,
at is I'm
just
looking at the
insult.
dictionary definition that says the killing or destruction of a large proportion. So that's not 1 in 10.
Yeah,
That's a large proportion.
things
It's
also
like-
change over time. We
Yeah.
aren't ancient Rome.
Yeah, not
you.
speaking in any no Latin in these conversations, boys. Actually, fair,
Although-
there's a lot of Latin in Warhammer stuff. So.
Although to be fair, the Romance languages are technically just bad Latin.
True, we do speak discount Latin
From-
stuff
from
in
Spanish,
continent.
Italian, French,
Yeah.
Romanian.
not
and
our
English.
Germanic. Our
What'd you
Germanic
say?
a bit. Which one?
Et tu pancreas. That's the only Latin phrase I know, apart from like. That's the only one I think I can.
Cookie.
Did you know
Ergo sum.
Veni Vidi Vici is pronounced
Oh, yeah,
Weni
yeah.
Weenie Weechi? Because
Weni
V does
Weenie
not
Weechi.
exist in Latin.
You-
That's another thing, that if you say Weni Weedy Weechi, I hate you. I don't care that that's how it's pronounced.
That
Stop
sounds like
doing that.
the beginning of, bear with me here, reference The Vine, where it's like, in my Valentino white bag? What? That one? No one's going to get that joke if they haven't seen Vine.
I just like the idea that you can
Vaguely
even like
remember.
use different accents to be like, if you had Scouts, like, it's Weni Winnie Weechy. Like, ugh,
They
sounds
don't,
even worse.
they don't know
with
what
that.
Scouse
Ugh.
is. Lucky for them. So, sorry, Iron Warriors.
Shout out to this episode of Lore Crimes for making fun of our audience. I'm a big fan.
Shout out to you guys.
I was being bullied and I needed to vent. It's fine.
Among Us?
Oh, no, stop. Speaking of decimation, though, as funny as we all make it sound, it was actually pretty horrible. So a lot of these legionaries, they obviously, some of them were friends, some of them had fought on Terra for the Emperor, only to then be killed by their own, essentially, within the ranks, because their new Primarch was essentially trying to, in a way, he was trying to reforge them, but it felt more like a punishment for something which they had seen as honourable service. So a lot of them were not happy. And this sort of created a tone and relationship with the Legion and Primarch where it was no longer father and son, and it was much more of a, you are my general, I am the soldier. So like many other legions, they love their Gene Father. They would literally die for him, like without a second thought. The Iron Warriors are much more pragmatic about like, oh, he's my general, so therefore I get in the way of bullets because it's good for the army, not because I actually like my...
Yeah.
Not because he's my father.
No, they don't really
There
call
is,
him
like-
father much.
There is an interesting corollary with like them and the Iron Hands again, though, because like again, Ferrus Manus was a taskmaster, but he did actually care about his sons. So there was that thing with like 1 degree further into being, a taskmaster as you become Perturabo. It's like you are just tools, and like, yeah, I know everyone goofs on like, oh, the Iron Warriors and Iron Hands, they're kind of like very similar. But I think, like, yeah, with the Iron Warriors in particular, it's just like whenever you see like the Triarchs or any of the characters in like a meeting with Perturabo, they're like shoulders straight. You don't say no back talk. You keep your thoughts to yourself. You don't go over the line even a millimeter because he's not very forgiving at all.
He beat up a lot of his sons, that's for sure.
He
Yeah.
did. He
And
would
then killed the rest.
Yeah.
he would often dish out punishment himself. And there's also, it reminds me of funny, I think I've mentioned it in a previous episode before, but there's a funny moment where Ferrus is talking about when he was conversing with Perturabo, and they're very pragmatic. They do get along decently well, as in like, you know, we're getting the thing done. But then Perturabo asks him in like an offhanded comment, how is it that you and Fulgrim are friends? And it's the only time apparently Ferris ever smiled in front of him, because he's like, Perturabo just wouldn't get it, because he just doesn't really. He has soldiers, he has battle comrades. They don't have friends in him or his legion, really.
And then Ferris was like, "Yeah, but you're friends with Magnus, so I'm still winning." It's like, oh,
Nice, got him.
He does have a good friend. He does, yeah. Having said that, he does have a good relationship. They do have a semi-good relationship with the Thousand Sons Legion. I think that's probably mostly from a side of like intellectual commonality. So he, like Perturabo and the Iron Warriors, greatly respect the Thousand Sons, again, for them being involved in like siegecraft and technology. The Iron Warriors have a big emphasis on like understanding technology, not using it to the same degree as the Iron Hand.
Yeah, they're like exclusively alien to one another, but they respect that they are like the best at what they do to an extent. They're like, oh, you're amazing with like gadgets and gizmos, and then you're amazing at like whatever that swirly whirly thing is that you've conjured. Like, that's cool. I have no idea how you're doing it.
It's cool.
But speaking of something iconic that would happen with the Legion, they would also gain their iconic phrase, iron within, iron without, which is a mantra they have to roar in battle but also live by. It's a kind of philosophy. And I'll ask Colin here for the next quote. It should be in the sidebar chat. And this is called the Unbreakable Litany, which is said throughout the Legion, if you can see it there.
I can. I'd be happy to read it out. Iron Warriors quote: "From iron cometh strength, from strength cometh will. From will cometh faith, from faith cometh honor. From honor cometh iron. This is the unbreakable litany, and may it forever be so."
So they always find like a circular way to come back to iron, basically the iron within themselves. They bring that strength. That's probably one like the quotes in Warhammer that does go pretty hard, I would say. That was like, imagine if you shout that as well.
I will say though, that's a lot of cometh. There's a lot of cometh in that quote.
Yeah.
I think these people,
ruined it.
I think that this is further proof that that whole gods are not real thing is a load of malarkey the Emperor's pushing. He has faith in everything he has. Stop being surprised people turn religious.
You can have faith in things which are not necessarily religious. I have faith that my delivery driver will come and he's delivering my pizza.
You can, but I think in the context of this,
Warhammer,
different kind of faith. Yeah, there's.
I like that idea that your example, how that when you get it, you're like, praise be to Pizza Hut when you get it.
Well, I know it's coming, but I'm not putting my hands together and worshipping the pizza gods, although maybe we all should because it's divine.
They bestowed an extra garlic dip. Praise be.
I praise be to him, because Lord knows you cannot out Pizza the Hut.
Real.
Like extra garlic dip for free. I'm not gonna lie, bro. You're saying some very, very sensual things here. You know what I mean? Miracles can happen.
Pizza Hut garlic bread is divine. It's just what I feel it doing to my arteries with every bite. Less divine.
But speaking of things that aren't so divine, Perturabo and the Iron Warriors, with the now Primarch at the helm of the Legion, they would be swelled with recruits from Olympia. This would immediately overtake the culture of the Legion, so that even their armor, their arms, it would all take on a more Greco-Roman feel, much more heavy on the Greco inspiration there. Obviously, Olympia basically being essentially ancient Greece with the warring states. And the Legion would also shift in a way where they would embrace their greatest strength, which was siege warfare, also partly interacting with technology, as I said before. But instead of being stubborn in terms of they won't change their tactics, they become flexible in a very strange way, in which is how the flow of siege warfare works. So they get very, very good at basically any fortification. They are pretty much the best Legion out there to either defend it or take on. Maybe not to create fortifications, because that's a contentious part with the Imperial Fists, but the Iron Warriors they start to specialize, many other legions, in their own style of combat, such as the Emperor's Children being duelists and generally quite good up close in certain regards. The Dark Angels being very adaptive and obviously having lots of varied technology and varied wings of the Legion. Iron Warriors, siegecraft. And as the Legion left the skies of Olympia, they would be confronted by a spacefaring advanced human culture called the Black Judges, which, as Perturabo had grown up on Olympia, he had heard many times as like a terrifying myth, a kind of like a boogeyman thing that would come for them. And they would actually discover these were ancient humans that would harvest other humans from different planets, and then they would turn them into like a kind of serum / biomass thing that prolonged their lives. And it was a first like Legion victory where Perturabo had like shifted the 4th Legion into his own, or made it into the image that he wanted it to be. And it would now start the path of like their numerous successes during the Great Crusade. And such was even the reputation they'd gained very early on from then. They would, as Eli mentioned earlier, they would be thrown into like the worst conflicts the Crusade had to offer. Many other things like the army, Imperial Army, and other legions, they didn't really enjoy fighting, or they would dread fighting beside the Iron Warriors because they knew it would be essentially a very grinding, a brutal fight. Because
yeah, they're like, oh, we're going to so and so. Oh, that sounds nice. Oh, the view screens. Oh, it looks like a nice planet. Who are we fighting with? 4th. Oh,
Great.
No.
Yeah, that
I'm gonna go write
sucks.
my will. Goodbye, father. Goodbye, mother.
In fact, I think some Imperial Army regiments even would straight up refuse, so they would have to send like penal colony troops to basically be cannon
Like, the idea
fodder.
was like, I'm going to go fight alongside the Night Lords rather than these guys. Go.
I mean, if you're fighting alongside the Night Lords, that's probably not as bad because they'd be horrible.
Watch them like healing someone like.
You wouldn't sleep well, but at least you'd be alive to sleep. You know what I mean? So, different,
Fair enough.
different strokes for different folks.
I'd probably still rather fight alongside them than the Thousand Suns.
True.
At least my soul wouldn't evaporate because their little warp spirit ran out of juice and I happened to be nearby.
So it reminds me of, you know, that meme where it's like just a random video of like a cooking thing, and then like randomly Queen Elizabeth like fades in the middle of the cut for some reason, and then it's like so she kind of like dissipates, like, and then it's just back to the cooking video. Very weird reference. But
Where do you get these memes?
I've
never seen that meme.
I will
before in
show
my
it to
life.
people, and some people listening will understand what I'm talking about. It'll just be a random cooking video, and then like very quickly edited, and then like the Queen will like very crappily PowerPoint fade away in like a weird cut in the
A
middle of
late
it.
queen.
Yes, very
Okay,
sad.
I know what you mean.
Yes, songs in the culture. But the Legion, the Legion would start to, over the decades of the Great Crusade, they would resent being thrown into this like the hardest situations. They wouldn't. There was no respite for the Legion. Again, it's like some of the most brutal conflict. And then they would turn to see other legions, such as Dawn's, Sanguinius's, or Horus's legions, and they would be showered with accolades, praise. They would be given, you know, rewards, technology. Meanwhile, the 4th Legion had fought just as hard, if not harder, and yet they would still, in a way, like many knew that the Great Crusade wouldn't last for a long time. It would be over it in a few short centuries. You know, their time wise.
You want to repeat that phrase one more time?
Well, when you're speaking about Space Marines who don't really age, you know what I mean? They didn't consider it that long. And they thought, so a lot of the time they were hunting for glory, many of the legions, and many of them were trying to get all their accolades and, you know, all the honors done before the Crusade would end, particularly towards the end, because there was a sense that they knew the Imperium was almost at the edges of the galaxy. And so the 4th were quite resentful of the fact that they were not lauded in the same way when they fought just as hard, again, if not harder. In fact, much of the Legion became garrison forces across Imperial worlds due to their expertise in like siegecraft. So they, like the Imperial Fists, would build fortifications in many different places, but they wouldn't be given the honor such as the Imperial Fists of building the Imperial Palace defenses, which were, you know, again, they say they would know siegecraft better than anyone, surely. So again, another slight, somewhat.
This poor Captain Herculesus being stationed at like the equivalent of like the Imperial World Post Office of Sector 9642. Like, oh, what am I going to do for the next 10, 20 years? Just going to like sit here, make sure that like nothing goes wrong, occasionally check the pipes so there's no leaks. Like, is that it? Yeah.
Pipe?
No more pipes. No more pipes. But saying that though, the Legion itself did have some uniqueness that it developed within amongst other legions. So they had the rank of warsmiths, which were kind of in a way like a bit more independent than compared to some of their equivalents in other legions like captains. And Perturabo made sure that the 4th Legion could, in a way, if it had to, operate without a Primarch. So they, similar to how they had done before, but they would operate still within decent strength. And it would all slightly come apart at the seams. A lot of the things would build up for the 4th Legion, especially as we get to the, the Sac Tradar Deep campaign, which is actually one of the very few defeats the Legion would face, and it'd be a massive stain to their honor. This was a garrison force led by Barabbas Dantioch. Shout out to the artwork I had made of this. I actually had 2 pieces of artwork made for this. One's very cool. They were attacked by the Xenos known as the Hrud, which, by the way, had not actually been... There was no official like artwork. If everyone tries to look up Hrud, they kind of look like very straight, like clothed creatures. They actually have very strange archaic guns, which are like almost like slightly Skaven-y muskets, which is, I think they were originally meant to be Skaven-y-esque, and they kind of move them a bit more to like maggoty writhing things. And the problem with the Hrud is being in proximity to them, things start to rapidly age, and I mean like to a scary degree. So the mortal men alongside Barabbas Dantioch and his men, they would die of old age, and even the walls of the fortress they were in started to wither and like crack, and even the legionaries inside their own armor. So no one knew how long a Space Marine could live, but it was supposedly kind of worked out because of the fact that Barabbas Dantioch had literally aged millennia inside his own armor, and his armor would rust apart. And it was only when
the image of like a guardsman who's just like spent loads of money to get like a banana shipped. He's like, treat. It's not corpse starch. You get a banana. This would be great. And then, like, as soon as the Hrud appears, he's like, he just unwraps it and it instantly becomes mushy. He's like,
throws it on the
why
ground.
am I 700 years old now? And then he just turns into a pile of ash. The poor guy.
Poor dudes. But Perturabo did come, and he eventually returned like with more troops, and they helped repel the Hrud. Even Perturabo supposedly suffered some of the aging process, and he had apparently aged like millennia, even though he kind of only looked a little bit older.
He got one grey hair, and he's like, what's this?
He received like a full-on brutal attack of it as well. Their weapons also aged. But in the wake of this conflict, the Legion received news that their homeworld of Olympia had rebelled. So this was like another shame on top of the previous failure of not securing the garrison at the Sacra-Dra Deep campaign. And the world of Olympia now, even though it had been transformed by the Imperium, it had been drained of men and resources. Again, the Iron Warriors had seen so much brutal conflict that so many of them had they needed to recruit so many, because obviously their attrition rates were pretty high. And I was thinking there's a part where in the books, I think it's I think maybe not Remembrances. I think it might be Remembrances, and they actually have you put a VR headset on Olympia just to see what some of the battles were like of Perturabo, and there's a bit where one of them puts it on and he just gets immediately sick because it's an overwhelming tide, gunfire and Iron Warriors missing limbs and fighting on. It's insane just to see how they basically fought. And now back above the skies of Olympia, Perturabo was pissed. He was incredibly annoyed's not even covering it, if I'm honest. He was just swirled with anger, and the people of Olympia try to negotiate with him, because obviously their world's basically falling apart now in terms of society-wise. But Perturabo didn't want to hear it, and he ordered decimation upon his own homeworld. And this was something the Legion, many of them were still obviously there were some who were still Terrans, but many of them now were very much from Olympia. They'd grown up here, and so many of them actually struggled to even carry out this order. Some of them even refused, like saying, there's a scene where one of them says, like, I grew up in a home like this, what are we doing? And some of them, again, this would lead to another small culling of their ranks as those, not strong enough to carry out the order. And Perturabo
is something that's not unheard of in other legions, like with Nostramo, where some of the Night Lords are like, I don't want to see this happen, they get killed. So yeah. Some Astartes, when they're like, I come from here, they get a bit defensive about you blowing up their homes, just saying.
Just a little bit.
Oh, what cowards, am I right?
Yo, where's the loyalty? But Perturabo eventually would confront his adopted sister Caliphone, the now very ancient, one who'd left in charge of Olympia back when he left for the Great Crusade, and he basically choked her to death, the old lady, very sad. And this is actually the point where he realizes what he's done, and he went too far, and he starts to weep, like Perturabo full on, like he's never cried in his life, and he starts to weep because he's killed his family, and his home world is like burning around him. Okay, sorry, Colin, you say something?
His singular moment of self-reflection amidst a sea of man-child behavior.
Pretty much, but then this Olympia has basically been decimated, so a portion of the population has been, they're basically cold. They've been, a certain anger has been taken out on them because they didn't, from Perturabo's perspective, Olympia didn't know how good they had it compared to so many other worlds where he's seen, they've seen the very worst the galaxy had to offer. So he's like, what do you mean? Why are you complaining? It's like the rich kid saying, I'm having a difficult time because my Ferrari's, not the right color. And Perturabo's going, you what? Like my whole family is not well. What are you talking about?
My Ferrari's in the shop. I have to use the Mercedes like a peasant.
That's what it sounded like to his ears. Obviously, they had real concerns. But the 4th Legion and Primarch were waiting to hear censure now because they realized they'd probably gone too far, but they were met with complete silence. No censure came from the Emperor. Perturabo thought, the Emperor he'll never forgive me for what I've done to my own home. The Emperor didn't say a thing. There was absolutely silence. Again, reinforcing the fact that the 4th Legion were simply not even acknowledged, which then sort of turned into, again, anger, resentment, because it is literally like he's screaming, clearly like a kid, Dad, notice me, even though the 4th Legion in a way feel the same, that, please, Dad, notice me, but it just reinforced their resentment to the Emperor and the Great Crusade, which so many had died for. And it would be in this position now that a certain War Master Horus would come to them, and he would exploit this sort of sense of, resentment towards the Emperor and the Imperium that didn't care about them. And that... Oh, go ahead, sir.
I have read some. I can't find the source, but I'm pretty sure I've heard that there is possibly a hint somewhere that Horus was the one who kind of kicked off spark of rebellion on Olympia to turn Perturabo on his side, but I'm not sure.
It's possible. When I read the Primarch book of Perturabo, it's generally implied that this thing had been building for basically since the start, essentially.
I know his foster father is still in charge when he leaves, and he's like, I don't want to be in charge. The tyrant of
Locos, yeah.
Locos, that's the one.
I think he's dead at this point. He died during the Great Crusade. But essentially, Olympia was made to compliant. It wasn't like many other primates, like Fulgrim. Fulgrim brought his world together through diplomacy. Fulgrim didn't even have to fight. Perturabo had conquered his world through force, and many of the 4th Legion, many of the Olympian in the 4th Legion had only known an existence like that of just might makes right, essentially. And that, my brothers, is the end of the first 3 legions during the Great Crusade. Obviously, the Horus Heresy for each of those legions starts immediately after that. Is there any questions or thoughts about any of the legions or some of the lore we've covered here?
Here's one. Of all the ones we've mentioned today, which is your favorite? I know what Eli's going to say for sure.
I guess we'll go. Also, Colin, do you want to say who's your favorite?
I
Is it none of them?
No. It's not the Dark Angels. I don't dislike the Dark Angels. I rate them a 6 out of 10. They're there. I'm pretty content. I have no interest in learning more about them, but I'm happy they exist, and Deathwing is fun. So I do like the Emperor's Children. I like their fall. It's a very, very tragic. They were one of the few legions who weren't just pricks. I actually do also like the Iron Warriors. I can't even muster the energy to say I hate Perturabo. I'm disappointed in everything about Perturabo.
Little bit
It's
like
like when-
child, yeah.
Like when your
Childish.
parents say it, they're not mad, they're just disappointed. That's what I feel every time I think about Perturabo. I'm
So
disappointed.
like you look
this
at them
character
like
exists.
you look at the Iron Warriors like they're a good friend of yours, and then you see their dad like drunkenly shouting in the living room. You're like, ugh, he's a really cool guy, but his dad is such an idiot.
Yeah.
He's got a problem.
I think I'll give it to Iron Warriors as the Legion because although I do also quite like the Emperor's Children, they joined Slaanesh. Spoiler alert, sorry, and I cannot abide that. She who thirsts must be defeated.
What about you, Eli? Who's your favorite? Obviously,
Yeah, we know. It's the Emperor's Children.
Praising the Infinite.
Except
what about you, Andy?
Dynasties, yeah.
I do like my Dark Angels. I've got to be honest. I like the King Arthur aesthetic. I like knightly order stuff, and I like their books. And I like the Lion.
They do have unbelievable drip.
They really do, especially the old Warhammer art.
Oh my
So
god.
much.
Yeah.
Bring back old Warhammer art guy. I don't remember his name. He's retired, but
John Blanche. I
Yep.
think it was.
when Warhammer looked cool.
Bring back whoever made the Eldar look like a packet of Skittles coming to kick your ass.
I would say I think maybe it's Legions. It's not obviously Primarch, but I will say it's difficult because the Emperor's Children have like the better earlier half. Like it's one that's like in the first half they had me. Emperor's Children have probably the better first half, but I think the Iron Warriors kind of slightly sneak up into first position for me, just because they just get such like they don't have a win, if you know what I mean. They just endure it like so much misery the entire time.
I like how like they're like, oh, maybe our dad will be cool. Oh no. Oh, maybe things will be better soon. Oh no, it's the heresy. Oh, well, maybe we'll have the. Oh no, we've lost the war.
That's
Welcome to
why,
Iron Cage.
that's why I like the Iron Warriors and not their dad, because they're just constantly like, I'm trying. I'm not giving up. I'm trying. But until like
They're
after
leading
that,
them with the biggest daddy issues, and they have the worst time of anyone.
until like after the heresy, they're like, that's when they're finally like, I give up. I'm just going to be the worst on purpose now.
They're like, I'm moving out. I'm making my own way. I'm going to get my own place. You'll see. I'll be successful.
They do have the better catchphrases, if you know what I mean, as well.
Iron within iron.
That is
pretty
the
sick.
most metal, and also the Unbreakable Litany is still. I wouldn't say the Emperor's Children or Dark Angels have better things to shout. I mean, Dark Angels is silent. You know what I mean? The Emperor's Children just shout for the Emperor, but it is slightly mean something because like for Daddy or something. But I think Iron Warrior's got the better overall. And the Emperor's Children better aesthetic. I'd say just like from like their Horus Heresy stuff, I think, because I don't think the modern like the 40k Emperor's Children have got they look a bit
Hey, we got drip.
No, I mean modern Dark Angels. I think I'd say the best modern drip, especially the Lions.
They do have a fairly decent war cry. Repent, for tomorrow you die. That's a cool one.
It's pretty good. That's actually it's not too bad.
I just think there's too many words in it. It's maybe not too many, but it's definitely approaching the upper limit of like, hey, you gotta stop.
We're trying to convey a
words.
complex thought in the middle of a battlefield.
When you need a short one, you just go for the lion. You're done.
Yeah, see that for the X is always great. Or just
The repent one is when you're like on the boarding torpedo and you're like just sending a transmission like you better be ready to repent tomorrow you die. How long has this thing got to go? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. We're gonna wreck you. Like that's when you say that one.
repent tomorrow you die is great for like you said, as you're entering the battle, not when you're on the battlefield and mid-charge. Then you just sound like you need to practice your writing skills.
I mean, the best one is Dredgenon's "Kill a man." That'd be the best.
My favorite's still Grimgor Ironhide. He just shouts, "Shame! Say my name! Say my name!"
Yeah.
That's pretty badass.
As he spreads dwarfs across the mountain.
It needs to be a crossover meme with the Breaking Bad moments, like "Say my name, Grimgor." Goddamn right it is.
With that being said, though, that was part 2 of the Great Crusade. Next time we should be doing the next 3 legions. So I'm guessing that will be Imperial Fists,
White Scars and Space Wolves.
Yes, that'll be those 3. I mean, that'll be a pretty. I think we've all got our favorite already before that's even started. But well, hopefully that will be quite a fun one because I think that happens. There's quite a lot that happens to, especially the White Scars with all their really good books. So we'll get into that one. With that being said, though, thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. I hope you guys all enjoyed this one. It's quite information dense, this one, but we hope we covered some very cool stuff. And we'll catch you all on the next one. Peace.
Take care, everyone. Have a good one.
Love you lots.